I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. The restaurant was full, music playing softly, candles glowing between us. I thought Ethan was about to propose after 3 years together. Instead, he smiled at another woman. Not just any woman. My best friend. And then he said the words that destroyed me forever. I think I'm in love with her. I couldn't breathe. I laughed at first because I thought it was a sick joke, but then she grabbed his hand under the table. Right in front of me. That night, I lost my boyfriend, my best friend, and the future I spent years dreaming about. But what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was what happened after. Because Ethan's older brother, Mason Carter, the cold billionaire everyone feared, saw everything. And the next morning, he showed up at my apartment with one terrifying offer. An offer that would change all our lives forever. At first, I thought he wanted revenge for his family's reputation. But I was wrong. Rain hit the windows of the restaurant while I stared at Ethan across the table, trying to ignore the nervous shaking in my hands. 3 years. 3 whole years together. And tonight felt different. Special. Ethan kept checking his pocket like he was hiding something important. Every few minutes, he'd smile at me in that soft way that once made me believe I was the luckiest woman alive. I thought he was going to propose. God! I was so stupid. You look beautiful tonight, he said. I smiled shyly. You've said that 3 times already. Maybe because it's true. The waiter poured more wine into our glasses while soft jazz played around us. Couples laughed quietly nearby, and the entire restaurant glowed with golden lights. It looked exactly like the kind of place where forever begins. I should have noticed Emily acting strange earlier that day. My best friend had spent an hour helping me choose my dress for tonight. She kept asking questions about where Ethan was taking me, what time we'd be there, whether I thought he'd finally propose. At the time, I thought she was excited for me. Now I realize she was preparing herself. Ethan suddenly cleared his throat. There's something I need to tell you. My heart nearly exploded. This was it. I reached for my wine glass to hide my smile. But before he could continue, a woman walked toward our table. Blonde hair. Red lipstick. Black dress. Emily. I blinked in confusion. Emily, I laughed nervously. What are you doing here? She didn't answer me. She looked at Ethan. And Ethan looked at her. That's when the air changed. You know those moments when your body realizes something terrible before your brain does? That's what it felt like. Ethan stood slowly. Emily moved beside him. And then, she slipped her hand into his. Right in front of me. The entire world went silent. I stared at their hands, waiting for someone to laugh and explain the joke. But nobody did. Claire. Ethan whispered. No. I shook my head instantly. No, don't do this. Emily looked guilty for exactly 2 seconds before lowering her eyes. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't mean for this to happen. The words hit like a knife. I looked between them repeatedly, unable to understand what I was seeing. My boyfriend. My best friend. Together. How long? I whispered. Neither answered. My chest tightened violently. How long? I repeated louder. Emily finally spoke. 6 months. 6 months. I actually felt my heartbeat stumble. For half a year they'd smiled in my face while sleeping together behind my back. Emily had hugged me while lying to me. Ethan had kissed me while loving someone else. Suddenly every memory became disgusting. Every vacation. Every dinner. Every I love you. Fake. All fake. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of them. You're unbelievable, I whispered. Claire, please let us explain, Ethan said desperately. I laughed. Explain? How do you explain betrayal? How do you explain destroying someone who trusted you completely? Emily finally stepped closer. We didn't mean to hurt you. That sentence broke something inside me. Because people who love you don't accidentally destroy you. They choose to. And somehow, that hurt even more. I don't remember leaving the restaurant. One second I was sitting there staring at them, the next, I was outside in the freezing rain, unable to breathe properly. Cars blurred past me. People brushed against my shoulders. But all I could hear was Ethan's voice repeating in my head. I think I'm in love with her. 3 years. Gone in one sentence. My hands shook as I walked down the sidewalk blindly, rain soaking through my dress and heels slipping against the pavement. Then my phone started ringing. Ethan. I declined it immediately. Again. 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 By the 10th call, I wanted to throw the phone into traffic. Instead, I turned it off completely. I couldn't hear his voice. Not tonight. Not ever again. I finally reached my apartment building around midnight. My mascara was ruined, my hair soaked, and my chest hurt so badly I thought I might actually collapse. The elevator doors opened slowly. And that's when I saw him. Mason Carter. Ethan's older brother. Leaning against my apartment door like he owned the entire building. Which, honestly, he probably did. Even at midnight, he looked terrifyingly perfect. Black suit. Dark coat. Sharp jawline. Cold grey eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Mason was the kind of man people whispered about. Billionaire. Ruthless businessman. Emotionally unavailable. Dangerous. I'd only met him a handful of times during family events with Ethan, but every encounter left me nervous for hours afterward. He wasn't loud. That was the scary part. Men like Mason didn't need to raise their voices. One look from him could silence a room. His eyes lifted toward me slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze moved over my ruined makeup and soaked dress. He told you. Not a question. A fact. Something inside me snapped. You knew. My voice cracked. Mason's jaw tightened slightly. That's not what I said. But you knew. Silence. And silence was answer enough. Pain exploded through my chest all over again. I laughed bitterly. Wow. Amazing. So everyone knew except me. That's not true. Don't. I pointed at him with shaking hands. Don't stand there pretending you care. His expression darkened slightly. I never said I didn't. I stared at him in disbelief. This man barely spoke during family dinners, yet somehow every word he said felt intense enough to cut through skin. I fumbled with my keys angrily, trying to unlock my apartment door. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Suddenly Mason stepped forward quietly. Give me the keys. I can do it myself. You're bleeding. I froze. What? He nodded toward my foot. I looked down and realized one of my heels had sliced the back of my ankle open while I walked. I hadn't even noticed. Blood streaked down my skin. Mason exhaled slowly like he was irritated by the sight. Without warning, he took the keys gently from my trembling hands and unlocked the door himself. The second we stepped inside, the emotional exhaustion hit me all at once. I dropped onto the couch and covered my face. And finally, I broke. The sob escaped before I could stop it. Humiliating. Painful. Loud. I cried so hard my chest physically hurt. And through all of it, Mason stayed silent. No fake comfort. No meaningless pity. Just silence. After several minutes, I finally whispered, "Why her?" Mason leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Because Ethan is weak." I looked up sharply. "That's your explanation?" "It's the truth." There was no emotion in his voice. No hesitation either. "He wants attention," Mason continued. "Emily gave it to him." I wiped my face angrily. "You talk about your own brother like he's a business mistake." Mason's eyes met mine. "That's because he usually is." Despite everything, a tiny laugh escaped me. And for the first time that night, Mason's expression shifted slightly. Not a smile. But close. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen before locking it again instantly. "Ethan?" I asked bitterly. "Yes." "What does he want?" "To explain." I laughed coldly. "Tell him to go to hell." Mason studied me quietly for several seconds. Then he said something unexpected. "You can hurt him back." I frowned. "What?" His voice remained calm. "Ethan cares about appearances. Reputation. Family image." He paused. "And he cares about me." I slowly lowered my hands from my face. "What are you saying?" Mason walked closer. Close enough for me to smell expensive cologne and rain on his coat. Then he looked directly into my eyes and said the one thing I never saw coming. "Date me instead." My breath stopped. "What?" "You heard me." I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're insane." "Probably." "This isn't a game, Mason." "I know exactly what this is." The room suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Too dangerous. "You hate relationships," I whispered. "I hate meaningless ones. And this wouldn't be meaningless." His eyes locked onto mine. "No." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. Because for the first time all night, someone was looking at me like I mattered. And that terrified me even more than heartbreak. "You've completely lost your mind." That was the first thing I said after Mason asked me to date him. Fake date him? Or maybe not fake. Honestly, I couldn't even tell anymore. The man standing in front of me was impossible to read. Mason Carter always looked calm. Controlled. Like nothing in the world could shake him. Meanwhile, I was emotionally bleeding all over my living room floor. He slipped his hands into the pockets of his dark coat and watched me carefully. "I'm giving you an opportunity." "To what?" I snapped. "Become part of your revenge plan." His expression didn't change. "It's not revenge." "Oh really? Because asking your little brother's ex-girlfriend out 5 minutes after she got cheated on sounds pretty revenge-related to me." Still calm. Still terrifying. "You said he humiliated you," Mason replied quietly. "I'm offering him the same experience." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." "No. I'm practical." God. How could one human being be so emotionally unavailable and attractive at the same time? I hated that combination. Especially tonight. I crossed my arms tightly. And what exactly would this relationship involve? Public appearances. My eyebrows lifted. "That's it. For now." For now, I repeated suspiciously. Mason tilted his head slightly. You can negotiate terms if you want. I actually laughed. You sound like you're closing a business merger. That's usually how agreements work. Of course he'd say that. This man probably negotiated billion-dollar contracts before breakfast. I shook my head and walked toward the kitchen, trying to clear my thoughts. Everything felt insane. 24 hours ago, I thought Ethan might propose to me. Now his billionaire brother was standing in my apartment asking me to date him. What kind of disaster movie was my life becoming? I grabbed a glass of water with trembling hands. Mason's voice came from behind me. You don't have to decide tonight. I turned around slowly. Then why ask tonight? For the first time since arriving, he hesitated. Just slightly. Then he answered honestly. Because if I waited until tomorrow, you'd convince yourself to forgive him. The words hit harder than expected. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I hated Ethan right now. But love doesn't disappear instantly. That's the cruel part. Even after betrayal, part of your heart still searches for excuses. I looked away quietly. He loved her, I whispered. Mason's jaw tightened. No. He wanted her. There's a difference. Yes. His answer came instantly. And something about the certainty in his voice made my chest ache. Maybe because Ethan had never sounded that sure about me. My phone suddenly buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another message appeared. And another. And another. Mason glanced at the screen. He's using different phones now. I swallowed painfully. Part of me wanted to read the messages. Part of me wanted to disappear forever. Mason walked closer before picking up my phone calmly. Then he blocked every number one by one without asking permission. I stared at him. You can't just do that. You weren't going to. I might've. You shouldn't. His tone wasn't controlling. It was protective. And somehow that was worse. Because Ethan spent 3 years making promises. Yet Mason had spent 1 hour actually taking care of me. That realization felt dangerous. I quickly grabbed my phone back. This is a horrible idea. Probably. You keep saying that like it's supposed to comfort me. It's honesty. I looked at him carefully. Why do I feel like you've wanted to do this for a long time? Silence. Mason's eyes darkened slightly. Too late, I realized what I'd just implied. My heartbeat instantly sped up. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. The room became very quiet. I swallowed hard. Mason. You know what the worst part was? He interrupted softly. My breath caught. What? Watching you spend 3 years loving someone who never deserved you. Every nerve in my body froze. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Especially not Mason. The cold, emotionless billionaire who barely talked during family dinners. But right now he was looking at me like he'd been holding something back for a very long time. And suddenly, I understood why Ethan always seemed nervous around his older brother. Because Mason Carter walked into every room like he could take anything he wanted. Including me. A dangerous silence stretched between us. Then. A violent pounding hit my apartment door. Both of us turned instantly. Another bang echoed through the apartment. Claire. Ethan. My stomach dropped. Claire, please open the door. Mason's expression became ice. Don't. But Ethan kept shouting. I know he's in there. My eyes widened. How did he? Another furious bang shook the door. Claire, please. I panicked instantly. This is bad. Mason looked completely calm, which somehow made things worse. Then Ethan shouted the one sentence that changed everything. He's just using you. Mason's jaw tightened slightly. But before I could react, he reached for my hand and intertwined our fingers slowly. My pulse exploded. Then he looked directly at the door and spoke loud enough for Ethan to hear. No, Mason said coldly. She's with me now. The apartment went completely silent after Mason's words. Even Ethan stopped banging on the door. I stared at our intertwined hands, unable to think properly. His grip was warm, steady, protective, and way too intimate. My heart pounded so hard I was scared Mason could actually feel it through my fingers. Outside the door, Ethan finally spoke again. You can't be serious. Mason's voice stayed calm. I usually am. I should have pulled my hand away. I should have told Mason this was insane. Instead, I stood there frozen beside him while my cheating ex-boyfriend lost his mind outside my apartment. Claire, Ethan said desperately, please don't do this. The audacity almost made me laugh. Don't do this, as if I was the one who betrayed him. Mason squeezed my hand once. Tiny. Almost unnoticeable. But somehow it gave me courage. I stepped closer to the door. What exactly am I doing, Ethan? I asked coldly. Embarrassing you. Silence. Then. You don't understand. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I understand perfectly now. Claire. No. My voice cracked slightly. You don't get to say my name like nothing happened. The hallway became quiet again. And for a second, I almost remembered the version of Ethan I used to love. The boy who brought me coffee during finals week. The man who danced with me in the kitchen at 2 a.m. The person I thought would someday become my husband. It hurt realizing that person probably never existed. Ethan exhaled shakily outside the door. I made a mistake. Mason's expression darkened instantly. But before he could speak, I answered first. No, I whispered painfully. You made choices. Another silence. Then Ethan's voice hardened slightly. You really think my brother cares about you? That sentence hit somewhere uncomfortable. Because honestly, part of me wondered the same thing. Mason noticed my hesitation immediately. Of course he did. Nothing escaped him. Ethan continued before I could respond. He does this, Claire. He wins people. That's what Mason does. I slowly looked up at Mason. His face revealed absolutely nothing. Which made everything worse. Tell her the truth, Ethan snapped from outside. Tell her you're only doing this because of me. Mason finally spoke. You should leave. No. The anger in Ethan's voice grew sharper. You've wanted this for years. My breath caught. Years. I turned toward Mason so fast my neck almost hurt. But he still said nothing. The silence answered for him. Oh my God! Ethan laughed bitterly outside the door. See, even now he won't deny it. I stared at Mason in complete shock. You. Mason interrupted quietly. Ethan. His tone turned deadly calm. Go home. But Ethan ignored him completely. You know what's funny, Claire, he continued harshly. He used to stare at you during family dinners like he wanted to kill me whenever I touched you. My entire body froze. Mason's jaw clenched hard enough to visibly tense. And suddenly every interaction from the last 3 years replayed in my mind differently. Every intense glance. Every moment Mason avoided being alone with me. Every strange silence between us. No. No way. That's not true, I whispered weakly. But neither brother answered immediately. Which terrified me. Ethan laughed again without humor. He never said anything because I was with you first. A pause. That's the only reason. I slowly pulled my hand from Mason's. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed space to breathe. Mason. My voice barely worked. Is he lying? For the first time since I'd met him, Mason looked uncertain. Not weak. Not nervous. Just dangerously honest. Then finally, quietly. No. The word shattered through me. Ethan cursed loudly outside. There. Happy now. But I couldn't even process Ethan anymore. I was too busy staring at Mason. The cold billionaire. The emotionally unavailable older brother. The man who apparently spent years hiding feelings for me while I dated someone else. You should have told me, I whispered. Mason's eyes locked onto mine. And what exactly would that have accomplished? I opened my mouth. Then closed it again. Because the painful truth, nothing. I would have stayed with Ethan. And Mason knew it. That's why you stayed away from me, I realized softly. He didn't answer. But again, silence was answer enough. Outside the apartment, Ethan suddenly slammed his fist against the wall. You're both unbelievable. Mason finally lost patience. When he spoke again, his voice turned frighteningly cold. You cheated on her for 6 months. Silence. You humiliated her publicly. Another silence. And somehow you still think you're the victim here. Even I felt chills hearing that tone. Ethan clearly did too because his next words sounded weaker. I love her. Mason's expression became unreadable. No, he said quietly. If you loved her, you wouldn't have destroyed her. And somehow, hearing Mason defend me hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Because Ethan never defended me like that. Not once. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ethan was leaving. But before he disappeared completely, he said one final thing. You think he'll love you better than I did? A long silence followed. Then Mason answered calmly beside me. Yes. And for some terrifying reason, I believed him. The moment Ethan left, the apartment became unbearably quiet. No shouting. No pounding on the door. Just silence. And Mason standing a few feet away from me like he hadn't just destroyed every remaining piece of emotional stability I had left. I wrapped my arms around myself tightly. You should go. The words came out softer than I intended. Mason didn't move. You don't mean that. My exhausted laugh sounded broken. You really do think you know everything? No, he replied calmly. Just you. That should not have affected me the way it did. But after tonight every tiny bit of care felt dangerous. I looked away before he could notice how nervous I suddenly became. You hid this for years. His expression stayed unreadable. Yes. How? That question seemed to catch him slightly off guard. I shook my head slowly. No, seriously. How do you spend years pretending not to feel something? For the first time, Mason looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Discipline. One word. But somehow it sounded painful. I stared at him quietly. Everything about Mason suddenly made more sense. The distance. The coldness. The way he barely looked at me during family events. It wasn't disinterest. It was control. And somehow that realization made my heart beat worse. You loved me while I dated your brother. The question came out barely above a whisper. Mason's eyes met mine immediately. Yes. No hesitation. No embarrassment. Just truth. God. I wasn't emotionally prepared for honesty tonight. You should hate me, I admitted softly. Why? Because I never noticed. A strange expression crossed his face then. Something almost sad. That was the point. I swallowed hard. Every answer from him felt like another crack opening inside my chest. I walked toward the window slowly, trying to clear my thoughts. Rain still slid down the glass outside. The city lights blurred beautifully through the storm. I don't understand you, I whispered. Mason stepped beside me. Close enough that I could feel his warmth. You're not supposed to. I turned toward him with frustration. See that? That mysterious billionaire thing you do is incredibly annoying. To my complete shock, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. A real smile. Tiny. But real. And somehow that was the most dangerous thing yet. Because Mason smiling at me felt illegal. You're smiling, I blurted out accidentally. His eyebrow lifted. Congratulations. Your eyesight works. I stared at him in disbelief. Wait, you actually have sarcasm. I try not to waste it. I laughed before I could stop myself. An actual laugh. After the worst night of my life. The sound surprised both of us. Then slowly, Mason's smile disappeared again. Not cold this time. Careful. Like he suddenly remembered this situation was fragile. Claire. The softness in his voice made me look up instantly. If you want me to leave, I will. There it was again. That impossible contradiction. Mason Carter looked like the kind of man who controlled everything around him. But with me he always gave me a choice. And that somehow mattered more than flowers or romantic speeches ever could. I looked down at my ruined dress and sighed. I look horrible. You look heartbroken. The honesty almost knocked the air out of me. No fake compliments. No pretending everything was okay. Just understanding. And somehow that comforted me more. My eyes burned again. Oh no, I whispered, covering my face. I'm not crying again. Mason moved instantly. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming, he simply stepped closer and gently pulled my hands away from my face. My breath caught immediately. His touch was unbelievably careful for someone who looked so dangerous. Claire. The way he said my name should honestly be illegal. I forced myself not to look directly at him. Big mistake. Because the second I did, everything changed. Mason was staring at me like I was something precious. Not broken. Not embarrassing. Precious. My pulse became chaotic. You shouldn't look at me like that, I whispered shakily. Why? Because I just got my heart destroyed. His thumb brushed softly against my wrist. Then let someone hold the pieces together. The breath left my lungs completely. Nobody had ever spoken to me like this before. Not even Ethan. Especially not Ethan. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. Mason wasn't intense because he flirted with everyone. He was intense because he almost never let himself feel anything at all. Which meant every emotion he showed me was real. Dangerously real. The realization made the room feel too small again. I stepped back nervously. We can't do this tonight. Mason's expression stayed calm, but I saw disappointment flicker briefly in his eyes. Okay. No argument. No pressure. Just okay. That made it worse somehow. I swallowed hard. You make it really difficult to think clearly. A quieter smile appeared this time. That isn't my fault. It absolutely is. For one dangerous second, the tension between us became unbearable. Then, my phone buzzed again. Emily. A long message preview appeared across the screen. Please let me explain. My stomach twisted instantly. Mason's expression turned unreadable again. And suddenly the heartbreak came rushing back all over. Because no matter how safe Mason made me feel, my best friend still betrayed me. And I still didn't know if I was strong enough to survive it. I stared at Emily's name glowing on my phone screen. For a second, I couldn't move. My chest tightened so painfully it felt fresh all over again. Mason noticed immediately. Of course he did. She doesn't deserve access to you right now, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. She was my best friend. The words tasted poisonous. Best friend. What a cruel joke. Mason stayed silent while I slowly unlocked my phone. 23 unread messages. From Emily. And somehow that hurt even more than Ethan's calls. Because boyfriends leave. People cheat. But best friends, they're supposed to protect your heart when everyone else breaks it. My fingers trembled as I opened the messages. The first one read, Claire, please answer me. The second, I never wanted this to happen. Then, I swear I didn't mean to fall for him. I laughed bitterly under my breath. Mason leaned slightly against the kitchen counter, watching my expression carefully. She keeps talking like love just attacked her in an alley, I muttered. The corner of his mouth twitched briefly. She's trying to avoid responsibility. I looked at another message. I didn't plan this. Then another. I know you hate me. Then finally. But he loves me. That one broke me. Because for some horrible reason, that sentence mattered. Not because I wanted Ethan back. But because after 3 years together, the idea that he could love someone else so easily made me feel replaceable. Forgettable. Small. I locked my phone instantly before tears could fall again. Too late. Mason crossed the room quietly. Look at me. I shook my head. Claire. His voice softened slightly. And somehow that made it impossible to ignore him. I finally looked up. Mason's eyes searched mine carefully before he spoke. You are not easy to replace. The ache in my chest deepened immediately. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? His gaze held mine completely. Because no one has ever made me lose control the way you do. I forgot how breathing worked for a second. The terrifying part, he sounded annoyed about it. Like falling for me had been deeply inconvenient. And somehow that honesty made it even more believable. I looked away quickly. This is insane. Probably. You keep saying that. Because it is. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. You're supposed to be emotionally unavailable. I was. The way he said was made my pulse jump again. I turned toward him carefully. What changed? Silence. Then. You cried tonight. My heartbeat stumbled. Mason looked away toward the rain-covered windows before continuing quietly. I spent years convincing myself staying away from you was the right thing to do. His jaw tightened slightly. But hearing you cry because of him, a pause. That destroyed whatever self-control I had left. The room suddenly felt too warm again. Every word from Mason carried weight because he didn't speak unnecessarily. Nothing he said felt fake. Nothing rehearsed. And after being lied to for 6 months, truth felt dangerously intimate. I crossed my arms tightly. You make it sound like this is all Ethan's fault. Mason's eyes returned to mine instantly. It is. That's not fair. It's accurate. I frowned. You really don't defend him at all, do you? A cold silence filled the room briefly. Then Mason answered honestly. I did. 4 years. Something about his tone made me pause. What changed? His expression hardened slightly. He hurt you. Simple. Immediate. Absolute. And suddenly I realized something terrifying about Mason Carter. Once he cared about someone, he cared completely. No halfway. No uncertainty. No pretending. That kind of love was powerful. But probably dangerous too. I sat slowly on the couch, emotionally exhausted. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel right now. Mason walked over quietly before sitting across from me. You don't need to decide tonight. That's the second time you've said that. Because you keep trying to force yourself to process everything immediately. I blinked in surprise. You noticed that. You analyze emotions instead of feeling them. Okay. That was annoyingly accurate. I narrowed my eyes. Are you secretly a therapist? No. Then why are you weirdly good at reading me? For the first time since arriving, Mason looked almost amused. I pay attention. The answer hit harder than it should have. Because Ethan used to forget things constantly. Important things. My coffee order. My favorite movie. The anniversary of the day we met. But Mason, he noticed when my hands shook. When my voice changed. When I was about to cry before I even realized it myself. And that comparison felt dangerous. Very dangerous. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. I closed my eyes instantly. I can't do this tonight. You don't have to. What if she's sorry? Mason's expression didn't soften at all. Being sorry after betrayal doesn't erase the betrayal. I looked down quietly. Do you forgive people easily? No. The answer came too fast. That probably should have scared me. Instead, it made me curious. What happened to you? For the first time all night, Mason went completely still. A silence settled between us. Heavy. Careful. Then finally he looked at me and said quietly. That's a dangerous question, Claire. And somehow, the way he said it made me want the answer even more.